Hello, welcome to this video series on MDX for SQL developers. I'm Nasir Ali Mirza at DoSQLBI.com. After looking at examples where we have multiple tuples, a set and an axis, now we'll see these MDX rules in MDX queries having multiple tuples, multiple sets and axis. So the example that we see on the screen has two axes and each axis having a set of multiple tuples. So on axis 0 there's a set of two tuples and each tuple is using element xyz, xyz, and then on axis 1 it has again two tuples, each one using attributes MNO, MNO. As you can see, whatever we have seen so far from the rules, it's not violating the union operator like rules, so the result is successful. Let's see an example of this. Let me switch to SQL Management Studio. I have this query already written. So this query on axis 0 has two tuples, a set of two tuples, and the tuple is made up of category attribute from product dimension, subcategory attribute, and the product attribute. The second tuple is again repeating the same three attributes, and on axis 1 we have tuple that's made up of attribute model name from product dimension, then product line and the style. Same three attributes are repeated in the second tuple. Let's run this query. So we see the result set because we are pulling a lot of data from all various attributes, but the query runs successfully. Let's continue on other examples. In this example, the query structure again has two axes, and on each axis there is a set made of two tuples. On axis 0 set, first tuple has attribute x and the second one has h with level 1, and then the second set on axis 1 uses attribute m and h but a different level, that's level 2. As you can see, there are two problems in this. Number one, tuples in the same set have a different structure, so they are not matching. As x is different from h, similarly on axis 1 we have m and h. The other problem on this is this attribute h is used across different axes. So one of the rules that we need to satisfy is same attribute cannot be used across axes. Attribute as in same attribute hierarchy. Even though there are two different levels used, but all the levels in a hierarchy belong to the same hierarchy, so that way we can say attribute h is used across different axes. Let's see an example of this. We switch to SQL Management Studio. I already have a query. Now what do you see in this MDX query is on axis 0 a tuple. The first tuple is with the attribute category and the second one is with the product categories category attribute. Now this category, let me go to the dimension, product dimension. This first attribute on axis 0 in the first tuple is this category attribute which has its own hierarchy. Even though I'm again using the category, but I'm using it from a different hierarchy, which you see is this one. So first tuple hierarchy and the second tuple hierarchy in the same set are not matching. Then on axis 0 I see subcategory and again subcategory, but this first subcategory is this attribute which is its own hierarchy, and the second one is having this subcategory. Let us run this query. So I get multiple tuples or sets must use the same hierarchy in the function. We get the error message twice because once for this and another time for this. Now let's say just to get that same hierarchy cannot be used across axes, let me delete this attribute. Okay, let me also delete this tuple. Now, as far as this single tuple set is concerned, we should be okay. We are not violating any rules. Let's run it. Still get a message. The product categories hierarchy already exists in the axis 0. So this is that second violation of the rule that same attribute hierarchy cannot be repeated across axes. Let's continue with our other examples. This example, we have two axes, axis 0 and axis 1. Axis 0 has a tuple, a set of single tuple, attribute x, and axis 1 has set of single tuple with attribute h. As you can see, within each set we are not violating any rules, so this should run successfully. Let's see an example of this. Let me switch to SQL Management Studio again. I'm having this example. So in this example, on axis 0 we have one tuple, set of one tuple using product dimension category attribute, and on XS1 again product dimension category again. Let's run this and we'll talk about it. It's running successfully. See an interesting thing here. We are repeating the category here, and we have one MDX rule that you cannot repeat the same attribute across accesses. Apparently it looks as if we are repeating, but we are not actually repeating the same hierarchy, because this category comes from this, which is itself an attribute hierarchy, and this category again comes from this attribute user defined hierarchy, that is this. So this hierarchy is different from the attribute hierarchy, this. So it's running successfully. Let's continue with our examples. Okay, this example, what you see as an rules example. Look at these two statements. The first one and second one are exactly the same, except for the difference that first example where x, y, z are not in the opening and closing brackets. The second one has an opening and a closing bracket. The first one results in an error. The second one runs successfully. This was that initially when we saw an example that what does this opening and closing bracket, what magic does it do? We'll see it with an example. Let me switch to SQL Management Studio. Again, to save the time, I have the query written already. So this first one, which is I'm using three attributes from product dimension, category, subcategory, and product. Now let me run this query. I get an error. It's saying members, tuples, or sets must use the same hierarchy in the function. See the same query again, which has this opening bracket and closing bracket. I'm running this and it's running successfully. So what is the difference? What's going on? In the first query, which is erroring out, it's using three attributes, but basically it is treating each one attribute as one tuple. So if I want to add more notation, this query is basically treated like this. I have this as one tuple, then this as another tuple, and then the third one as third tuple. So in this case, when we don't use these opening and closing brackets, it is treating each single attribute in the set as a tuple. So which means it's treating it like this. Now you can understand. We are having a set of three tuples and the hierarchy is not matching. So when you run this query, you get that same error. Members, tuples, or sets must use the same hierarchy. Now what is happening in this case? When we use the second example successfully, that time it is considering all the three attributes as a single tuple. Within the tuple, the MDX restriction is you cannot repeat the same hierarchy within the tuple, but you can use different attributes, different hierarchies from various dimensions and make up a single tuple. That is why this one is running successfully. So that's kind of, to understand why the earlier one was failing and what is the MDX rules and why that is failing. Okay, so that completes the example with multiple tuple sets and accesses. Now we'll see the examples about measures dimension. In this first example, we have a query structure having single access, a set of single tuple where we give the dimension name. So let's see an example of this. Let me switch to SQL Management Studio. So what you see in this example is I use the measures dimension name with .members. I'm running this query. The query runs successfully. It shows me all the members, all the attributes of the measures dimension, which is across all the major groups. So it's showing me because all these fact attributes belong to the measures dimension, and majors dimension is a single hierarchy dimension. In this second example on the screen, what you see is single axis of a set wherein there are two tuples. First tuple has f1 fact attribute and the second tuple has f2. It is not violating any rules because all the fact attributes belong to the same hierarchy, so it doesn't violate any union operator like rules. Let me switch to SQL Management Studio. In this query, we have a single axis, that's axis 0. First tuple is having internet order count and the second tuple is having internet sales amount. Let's run this query. It's running successfully. Let's continue with the examples. Third example, we have a single axis, a set of single tuple using two attributes f1 and f2. All the fact attributes of a majors dimension belong to the same hierarchy. It's violating one of the rule that the same hierarchy is getting repeated within the same tuple. So the result would be error. Let's see an example of this. I have this query again. On axis 0 there is a set of single tuple using two attributes, internet order count and internet sales amount. When we run this query, it says the majors hierarchy appears more than once in the tuple, so it's violating that rule. In this example 4, we have MDX query structure with two axes, axis 0 and axis 1. Axis 0 having a set of one tuple with f1 attribute and axis 0 with a set of one tuple with f2. Now what's happening in this one is, because all the fact attributes belong to the same hierarchy, as majors dimension is a single hierarchy dimension, so in this case that hierarchy is getting repeated across the axes, which is not allowed. Let's see an example of this. Now what you see in this query is there are two axes, each axis having a set of one tuple. In first one we are using internet order count and in the second set on axis 1 internet sales amount. Let's run this query. It's giving an error saying the majors hierarchy already appears in the axis 0, which means that you cannot repeat the same hierarchy across the axes. This also brings an important point that because majors dimension is a single hierarchy dimension, so you can use attributes from the majors dimension only on any single axis. You cannot use them on more than one axis. The last one is showing an interesting behavior difference between majors dimension and any other dimension. Now in this first example of MDX query, we are using on axis 0 the dimension name majors and it runs successfully. In second query, in the below part of the screen, we are using the other dimension, that's product dimension name on axis 0 and it's resulting in an error. Let's see an example of this. In the first query, I am referring to majors dimension, nothing else, on axis 0 and I'm running this query. Query runs successfully. What does it return? It returns reseller sales amount. I am not referring to any particular member. Why does it choose reseller sales amount compared to anyone else that are available there in the majors dimension? It's because at the design time, reseller sales amount has been configured as the default member out of all the members available in the majors dimension. Now let's run another query which is referring to the product dimension. Let's see what does it return. It's saying the product dimension contains more than one hierarchy. Therefore, the hierarchy must be explicitly specified. So let's go to product dimension. Every single attribute in this dimension is a hierarchy as well. And then any user-defined hierarchies constitute their own hierarchies. Now because the product dimension has multiple hierarchies, we need to define which one we want to pick up. It cannot pick up anything on its own. In this aspect, the majors dimension is different because it's a single hierarchy dimension. Even if you mention only the dimension name, it picks up a default member of that hierarchy. That completes what we wanted to see about measures dimension. This is probably one of the most important sessions on learning MDX language for SQL developers, where we try to conceptualize the MDX rules. We first described the notations that we would use, and then we saw those rules in various examples across tuples, single tuple, multiple tuples, single set, multiple sets, and then the measures dimension. I'm Nasir Ali Mirza at DoSQLBI.com. Thanks.